Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Abby.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Fletcher.
And today's story is about Sanballat and Tobiah.
Tobiah.
Sanballat and Tobiah. These guys are
Michelle's favorite. Hi, Michelle, if you're listening.
But she's
we
not
were talking
here.
just before recording that we should have had her on as a guest, and we didn't.
But she's
We
making
even
shepherd's
said,
pie.
yeah, Fletcher volunteered. He's like, I'll go to the kitchen and make the shepherd's pie.
People are listening. They're like, "What does shepherd's pie have to do with anything that we're talking about?"
Yeah.
It doesn't.
If you're
doesn't.
not Canadian.
But, yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Shepherd's pie is a Canadian thing too, right? Like
I think so.
I'm sure we make a lot of Canadian references that people don't get. We just don't even know it.
Shepherd's
true.
pie.
We wear shoes only outside. We take them off when we go inside.
We're
That's
all
something
wearing
that frustrates
shoes
me.
right now when we're inside.
When I lived in Quebec, I had no idea why. Shepherd's pie is what we eat, but in French, it's called pâté chinois.
Yes.
Chinese pie, which is it makes even less sense.
Makes
Like
less sense.
shepherd's pie kind of makes sense maybe, but then yeah.
I think I like pâté chinois better than shepherd's pie.
I mean,
because it's hilarious.
Oh, just because
Not the food. They're the same food.
like, this is pâté chinois and this is shepherd's
No,
pie.
it's the
Can you tell
same.
the difference?
Yeah, one has mashed potatoes, the other one has really mashed potatoes.
Right, there you go. So we have already thrown this episode off the rails.
Thanks
but
for listening. We're done.
What are
Bye
we
for
even
now.
talking about? I forgot we were recording for a
We
second.
will bring things back now. Sanballat, Tobiah, Michelle, that's what brought us off. Thank you for bringing us off topic, Michelle. Sanballat and Tobiah, they're troublemakers. They in the story of Nehemiah, they are troublemakers. And so since today's story is about troublemaking buddies, if you got to choose one person to be your co-troublemaker,
Troublemaker.
who would you choose? And
We
I
all
kind of just
agreed.
think that Abby is going to go Taylor Swift here.
No, I actually thought about that. And no, she's not trouble. Trouble,
bad blood.
trouble.
Yeah.
We all decided that we are not going to pick our spouses because all of us would actually pick our spouses for this question.
Right.
Are we allowed to pick somebody else's spouse?
Oh.
Sure.
Like, I think, well, I'm going to just
As
say,
long as it doesn't get awkward.
Michelle seems like somebody who gets in trouble a lot, and she would be good at getting out of trouble. So I'm going to pick Michelle before anybody else talks.
Because she's not a regular mom.
Sometimes
She's
she
a cool
comes to me
mom.
to help her get out of trouble. You got to help her think of.
Well, the goal is to get in trouble,
Get
so
into
we'll be
trouble.
fine.
That's funny.
Yeah, I could see
So,
you and Michelle causing a lot of trouble together.
she's a party.
Yeah, yeah. What do you got, Abby?
I'm actually thinking of somebody that nobody is going to know. But one of my friends from camp, when I worked at camp, her name was Rachel. And I don't like getting in like serious trouble because I don't like getting in trouble. So we would just do things that were kind of a little bit edgy, but like not going to hurt anybody. So like we would sneak out of the cabins at midnight and leave our campers there
You
and go skinny
just-
dipping.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know if this is podcast appropriate.
Who did we sign up to do
Goodness.
this?
I thought you were
podcast
going to,
with?
we short-sheeted somebody or
No,
we
no.
stole some food, but
Yeah.
no.
No, those hurt other people. We just went out by ourselves. It was a party.
Breaking the rules.
It was a party, so we did that, and we did a couple other things that I'm not going to mention on the podcast.
Okay.
But,
I think that should have been
but
the whole
that was
thing
the
that
most
you did.
memorable.
Anyway,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm going to pick Rachel.
Rachel. If you're out there and listening,
If
Rachel.
you're out there, Rachel.
If you know Rachel, you need to know that she's a troublemaker.
Yes.
Everybody knows that. Which
There
is
you
good fun stuff. That.
So
no
when
one
I
ever-
originally looked at this question, I thought we were choosing fictional people.
Oh.
You can do that.
First person that came to mind was Loki because
Oh.
he's
Okay.
just, the
Mischief.
god of mischief,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then as you guys chose
Real
people that are real, I thought Sam Catling.
Oh, that's
I
a good
could get
one.
into a lot of trouble with Sam.
You guys would have fun in the kitchen.
It's true. It's true. Actually, we've there have been some shenanigans on the golf course already.
Okay.
We went out golfing a while back, and after more than one hole, I got back to my cart, and I was like, "Why is my bag undone? Like the strap is not done up on my."
So you would have driven
cart."
away
So
in
I
the
would have
cart.
driven away, and so I tie it up, and then after like the third time, Sam's like, 3 times I've undone that strap, and you've noticed every time." I'm like,
That's
"Sam,
funny.
So, and then we
one.
drive over each other's golf balls on the course as well, just to wedge it into the ground.
Nice. Harder to hit. That's funny.
Yeah,
There you
that
go.
guy's trouble.
Sam's pranking Jay. That's
Yeah.
very funny.
So yeah, we'd like to know who you
Who's
would
your
choose
troublemaking
as your
buddy?
troublemaking buddy, either fictional or real. And let us know on our social media, the Story Fulfilled Podcast, or at Story Fulfilled Podcast, or email us at story@bfmc.org. So as always, we do encourage you to read the stories for yourselves that we read through each of our episodes to get the whole picture of what is going on. And today's story takes place in the book of Nehemiah.
Is there any weird names we can call him? Like, remember we had Potterhead, Nehemiah.
No, we need to go for Sanballat and Tobiah.
Sandblaster.
Sandblaster's good.
Sandblaster and
Tobias.
Toe.
Like with your foot and you're biased
This
against
is
something.
so bad. All right.
Wow. So last week we talked about Athaliah and her family troubles, and she had many family troubles, and that took place in the divided kingdom. And so today's story actually jumps ahead a few hundred years to after both the northern kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah have fallen. So Israel was conquered by the Assyrian Empire, and that's where many Israelites actually were relocated to other regions. And within the Assyrian Empire, and other recently conquered people were brought into Israel, and that's where we saw some like intermarriage happening and whatnot, and that's where the Samaritans. That's where we actually see the kind of the creation of the Samaritan people. And Judah was conquered by the Babylonian Empire, who had come into the north as well, taken over the north, and then also taken over Judah. And many Jews were brought into captivity in Babylon, and that includes Daniel and Ezekiel. And roughly 70 years later, after the Persian Empire has taken over, a king named Cyrus actually decrees that the Jews are allowed to return to their home, and the temple is eventually rebuilt. So he had just kind of a different way of conquering, which allowed people to re-congregate in their people groups.
Yeah, so today's story takes place, it's at the beginning of a time called the Second Temple period, and this period lasts from 586 to 70 AD. 586 BC to 70 AD, so it's a long time. And here are the dates for the events that Jay has just mentioned. So Assyria began its conquest of Israel around 740 BC, and by 720 BC, its capital, Samaria, was captured. The beginning of the Babylonian exile begins in 605 BC during the first deportation. That's when I think Daniel was left. And then in 587 BC, Jerusalem was destroyed and burned for good by King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. Now, Cyrus's decree to return to Jerusalem only takes place 1 year after the destruction in 539, and then the Second Temple is completed and rededicated in 515 BC.
Right.
And then today's story takes place roughly 70 years later under the reign of a king named Artaxerxes.
Yeah, so we know that this story takes place in Jerusalem because they're rebuilding Jerusalem.
Right.
And Jerusalem is in modern-day Israel. Now, Sanballat and Tobiah were from some cities in Moab, and Moab is actually modern-day Jordan. So just a little bit above Israel.
Cool. So, like we said, today's story takes place in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was the cupbearer of King Artaxerxes of Persia, and at one point he asks the king if they could return to Jerusalem and repair it because the city was in rubbles, and he was incredibly saddened by the fact that his city was destroyed. The king agrees and sends Nehemiah with all the workers and material and supplies that they need to rebuild the city.
Which is also, it's similar to
Cyrus.
Ezra and Cyrus, and Ezra was actually loaded up with like the best wood and materials that were needed in order to go and to rebuild the temple. So kind of a parallel that happens here.
So Nehemiah is sent basically with this letter sealed by the king that says, give him all that he needs. This is what I want. They're going to go rebuild the city. So eventually Nehemiah actually becomes the governor of Judea, which is the region Jerusalem is under the Persian rule. And that's when we meet today's main characters, Sanballat and Tobiah. So Sanballat was called the Horonite, and Tobiah was the Ammonite from Ammon. Anyway, those are the two main characters of today's story. So Sanballat was an official of the Persian Empire, and he was based out of Samaria. And Tobiah was another official in the Persian Empire, probably out of Ammon. So now Nehemiah, his goal is to rebuild Jerusalem, rebuild the walls, because they've been completely destroyed and burned from the destruction of Jerusalem back when Babylon took it over. So Nehemiah's gone to Jerusalem, and he's showing the Persian officials this letter to show, like, okay, look, this is what the king wants. I'm not going and rebelling.
Right.
I got this letter from the king. And Sanballat and Tobiah read this, and they're not happy about it. The line from the Bible, it says, it was displeasing for them to hear someone seek the welfare of the children of Israel.
Right.
It's like, I don't want these Jews to succeed. I don't like them.
Right.
This is their political reasons. Obviously, we've talked about religious reasons and historical reasons. They don't get along with the Jews.
Yeah.
This is because of the fights with Ammonites and Moabites back in the day. This is from when Samaria is trying to fight with Jerusalem on who's the capital of Israel.
Right.
So there's a bunch of reasons why the Samaritans don't. This is one of the reasons why the Samaritans don't like the Israelites, and vice versa. So Sanballat and Tobiah, they're enemies of Nehemiah at this point.
This is really important for us to know when we read a book like Nehemiah, because it doesn't actually say in the book, because of all this that had happened, they didn't like Nehemiah and the Jewish people. We just read that they wanted to get in the way, and so we're like,
who are these guys, and
who
why
are they, and why do they want to get in the way? And so it's important for us to understand. And sometimes the only clue that we're given is the Horonite. Like the word, the Horonite, tells us where he's from, and then we have to kind of dig into why that would lead to animosity between the two. So it's really important to, when we talk about the context of the stories, background, geography, history of all that's going on, it's actually really, really important in order to fully grasp what's going on in the stories.
Because otherwise you just have these two guys that are trying to mess with Israel, and we're like, well,
Yeah.
what's up there?
What's their problem?
Why
do they have a bee in their
what's up
bonnet?
their butt? Anyway, so when Nehemiah finally got to Jerusalem and he started telling the Jewish leaders and the people of Jerusalem his plans, they all supported him. Let's go build the wall. Let's do it. But again, Sanballat and Tobiah, they mocked him, and they called him a rebel against the king. Like, what is this guy doing? He's going to go rebuild the wall. Yeah, right. What a rebel. Not in a good way. The rebel is like a cool thing these days.
Yeah,
rebel
yeah,
is
yeah.
bad, especially when you're a servant of the king.
Right. Well, and you wouldn't want that. Like, it's not, they're not mocking him in jest or like jeeringly. They're mocking him, and they want him to die. And so actually,
They want him to fail utterly.
Yeah.
at his
Calling him a
quest.
rebel, if that gets back to the king, that's actually horrible news for
And dangerous,
Nehemiah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So building eventually actually starts with Nehemiah, and Sanballat is even more furious that they actually got it off the ground and started building. And he started mocking the Jews even more, ridiculing them. And he actually started gossiping to the wealthy men and the other officials of the region. Who do these Jews think they are? Like, what do you think they're doing? Do you think they'll get the glory of Jerusalem back? Because it was completely and utterly destroyed. Then Tobiah comes out with the comment, if a fox jumped on the wall that they're building, it would collapse and fall over.
Yeah.
Mocking their building skills, mocking their even attempt to rebuild Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And despite these insults, despite the constant influx of insults by Sanballat and Tobiah, Nehemiah keeps building, and the people of Jerusalem keep building the wall.
Yep.
So as Sanballat and Tobiah see that the wall is continuing despite their best efforts, they gather all their friends together, and they plan this attack.
Right.
They're going to, go into Jerusalem, cause a bunch of trouble, and try to halt the building process. But the Jews end up finding out about this plan. So Nehemiah tells everyone working on the wall to carry a weapon in one hand and keep building in the other.
Yeah.
And he even splits the workforce. He goes, okay, half of you keep building, the other half stand guard, and then switch every once in a while. We're going to keep building. And it's like not even one worker didn't have a weapon on them when they were working,
Right.
just to keep the wall safe. Now, the wall is almost done. All they have to do is install the gates. And Sanballat and Tobiah, they're running out of options. The wall is almost done. They're seeing the success. Again, they're furious, but they're running out of options of how to sabotage this wall.
What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? So they decided to send these letters saying, oh, Nehemiah, come visit us. We want to talk to you. Let's have a private meeting.
Right.
They send 4 of these letters. And Nehemiah's like, this sounds suspicious.
Right.
This is sad.
I think they're going to hurt me in some way. I'm not going to these meetings. Not a chance.
Nehemiah's not stupid.
He's not
Right.
dumb. No, he called them out and he read the meaning of the letter.
He's like, Tobiah is sus.
Yeah.
Sussy
Tobiah. Anyway, so they send him again. I said they send 4 letters of the same inviting Nehemiah over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
The 5th letter that they send, it's basically filled with lies and slander about Nehemiah. You're going to call yourself king. You're
Right.
sending out these prophets to announce the new king of Judea, the new king of Israel, and you're going to rebel and create an army. And Nehemiah's response to this is, at the end of the letter, they say, well, we want to talk to you about what your plans are in the future. Nehemiah's like, no, I'm not going to leave the wall. You're not going to try to trick me. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can lie about to get me to go away from this wall and to stop my goal. So Sanballat and Tobiah, their one last final attempt at sabotaging this effort is they send a false prophet named Shemaiah to try and trick Nehemiah into leaving the wall and going in and hiding. So he basically gets this man and he goes, okay, there's been death threats against you. You need to go. You need to run and hide to protect yourself.
Right.
And Nehemiah basically just says, I'm not going anywhere. There's nothing that you can say that will make me run. Who am I that I'm going to run away and flee and sin against God? So Nehemiah, despite Sanballat's and Tobiah's best effort, completes the wall, puts up the gates, and is able to rebuild Jerusalem.
Yeah. So cool. I love it.
Best part about it, they complete it in 52 days. They built the entire wall around Jerusalem in 52 days.
That's seriously
and
impressive.
parts of it still stand today.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was well built. It wasn't even.
Yeah,
like
no,
it
the
was-
many foxes have climbed and not crumbled the wall,
That's
I'm
right.
sure,
That's
since
right.
the time.
I always get a kick out of Sanballat and Tobiah, and I picture them as like these cartoon villains.
Me too.
And one of them just has this high pitched snide,
Like a Beavis and
voice.
Butthead kind of.
Well, it's kind of and even like in that whole fox mocking, he's like, "Hey, boss, look at that wall. You
Yeah.
think it's gonna stand, but it's not even a fox is gonna knock it over."
honestly.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's how I picture them every
so
time.
good.
Every time I read this story. So I love them, but I also hate them at the same time because of what they're trying to do and the way that they're trying to get in the way of the work of Nehemiah. I think it's important when we think of this. There's some major takeaways. One of the things, like we talked about the northern kingdom, and you mentioned like trying to fight over where the capital should be. When Israel in the north was first established, one of the first moves of the king was to build a temple there, or to declare the north as a place of worship. And then there was fighting from that point forward about where people would worship. And he was worried that people from his 10 tribes that were with him would go down to Jerusalem and remember how good it was to be a part of the United Kingdom and Jerusalem, and that they would defect or that they would leave, right? And so he declared that as the place of worship. And that has actually continued throughout. And it continues even to, like, Jesus meets a woman at the well, and that's a point of conversation. They have
The Samaritans and Jews at that point didn't even get along.
Did not
they
get
were
along.
enemies.
Yeah. And so we see this at play here, and Tobiah and Sanballat are protecting their own interests, or protecting the interests of their people. And some of it has just been passed on to them. It's been ingrained in them that the Jewish, like the southern kingdom is just bad. And part of it is also that they don't want to see the temple restored because that is a threat to their peoplehood or their identity as a nation in the north. And so we need to be aware in our lives of the things that rise up within us that are actually us protecting our own interests, that sometimes we're not even aware of them, but we might have conflict with people where we just really want to stand up for our own rights, but that's not, and we see this in Nehemiah, this is not the way of the Lord. It's not about protecting our own interests. It's about continuing on in the work that he's set before us. Interestingly, when they send that fifth letter, they fill it with lies, right? And Nehemiah could have said, whoa, hold on. I'm not trying to be king. I actually love
and
serving the king.
Get caught up on those lies. Yeah,
get caught up in all those details and protect himself and his reputation and stand up for himself. And he's like, I don't even have time for this nonsense. This is just a distraction. And so for us as believers, it's really important for us to understand that the enemy's going to try and throw distractions our way all the time. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to just realize what it is and continue on in what the Lord has set before us. Let's not get distracted by the things that are in place in order to take us away from the Lord. A quote that I wrote in my notes for when I teach this class at Cape and Ray Harbor is, I said, Jesus says, don't waste your time with the trolls on Twitter. Now, just in case you're wondering, there is no version of the Bible that has Jesus saying that.
And if Jay was a Bible translator, there might be.
That's right. That's right. But we see that even with, he talks about the wheat and the tares, and he talks about the enemy coming in and sowing tares among the wheat, and we can get really caught up in trying to
call that
out and identify those things that are not of the Lord and root those out. And he says, just keep going, keep focusing on the Lord, and trust that he will actually take care of that. And so many times through the Psalms, in Hosea, I think it is, or Micah, I can't remember. One of the prophets talks about the Lord will vindicate me. Like I'm not worried about protecting myself and defending myself. It's the Lord's work. So we need to be aware of that because troubles and opposition are going to come. Sanballat and Tobiah are present in each and every one of our lives as a believer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for jumping ahead and answering the question before I got
Exactly.
All right.
So Jay, how does this story? No.
Well, I think I just said it.
There we go. So yes. So the question for those of you that don't listen: how does the story fulfill the story of God through the Bible? Rewind about 2 minutes,
and listen again.
Listen to Jay
and hear it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us today.
Hope to see you next week.
Bye for now.